Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated economist here. I'd like to start by thanking everybody who has gone to Jordan's GoFundMe page. Over $2,000 in the last 24 hours have been contributed to helping out her nephews. She was pretty much just tossed into her lap. Her three nephews from a sister and the father who is not anywhere to participate or help out. She is taking on a heck of a challenge looking after her sister's kids, and she is really feeling overwhelmed. And that $2,000 that came in the last 24 hours made her feel incredibly relieved. Now, it's not quite, enough to do what she needs to do because she has lawyer fees. She's got to try to figure out this legal battle. She's got to figure out how to get state assistance when the kids are already on a state assistance in another state. She's got all this stuff that she's got to deal with. And, like I said, getting that GoFundMe page to swell as much as it did in the last 24 hours really gave her a sense of relief to a very overwhelming situation. So I cannot thank you guys enough. Please, if you haven't gone and contributed to it, if you can, even $5, $10, anything you could do to help out would just be amazing. And I'm going to continue to do these shout outs for her until she reaches her goal. So the quicker we do it, the better. Anyway, thank you very much again, guys. Go find the link down in the description. All right, let's talk about economics just a little bit here. The mask mandates are coming to an end, and this is going to have an impact on the domestic manufacturers. And it's a real good example of the bullwhip effect. And this is something that I said was going to be taking place throughout many industries within the economy. Now, I'm going to leave a link down in the description to an article that does a great job of talking about this bullwhip effect, although they don't talk about the bullwhip effect at all. They just talk about the impacts of it, and then I'm relating the article to being the bullwhip effect. But ultimately, what happens here, and I think a good analogy for it was the plumbing fittings that I had used, where there was a particular plumbing fitting that excavators and people who do groundwork or put in septic systems like to use. It connects two different pipes of different styles, but of the same size, so like, or even different size. But it's pretty much a rubber like fitting that goes onto each end of the pipe with hose clamps on each side of it. A lot of times referred to as a Fernco fitting. That's a brand name. But anyway, so these particular fittings, right? They ran out of stock, and when these guys who like are in need of these things, I mean, it's such a small part. It's like, it's less than $20. It's like they're like $10 for these things, and it holds up thousands of dollars worth of production because you cannot put these two pieces of pipe together without it. So these guys who were in desperate need of these things to complete their jobs, when they came in, like I remember the first one who came in, he bought all of them off the shelf, and I'm like, hey man, no problem. The warehouse has a lot of these things. We can order more. And he's like, nope. He says, I'm not going to come up in short supply again of these things. I'm going to always have them on hand, even if I don't need them. So he bought them all. Well, the next guy who came in looking for them, again, once we had them in stock, he did the exact same thing. Well, these guys, they didn't need four fittings in each. They only needed one. Well, my computer algorithm, or the computer algorithms out there, it's not just mine, but the computer algorithms, start picking up the idea that, okay, well, there's a huge demand for these things because they keep flying off the shelf, right? Every time we go to order more, we're out of stock. So they start, instead of ordering in four, they order in eight. So if this sort of thing continues to happen, what ends up going through the distribution line is that they're noticing that there's a huge demand for Fernco or for this particular fittings. And then it goes all the way up to the manufacturer who's saying, hey, you guys are constantly out. There's this huge demand for these fittings. We got to ramp up production. Okay, so ultimately, when you go back down to the retail end of things, the only person who really saw it was me, who said, well, you don't need that many. You can buy just one. I'll have more on the shelf. They didn't do it. But nobody else throughout the distribution line realizes that that's what took place. They just see the huge demand for it, but not realizing it was ultimately a panic buy or a hoarding purchase in order to prevent from there being a slowdown in their production later on in the future. So it was an overstocking, like I don't know, like an overpurchase. It was bigger demand than what they really wanted. And a lot of people were doing this throughout, like, even with our own store here, we were being allocated material. And so, like, when you're allocated material, then you order more than what you typically want so that you can try and get what you actually needed. So if you wanted 20 pieces, you order like 50 pieces and maybe you get 20 pieces. But if you order 20 pieces, they might only send you 10. So you got to order more than what you really wanted, which again increases the demand that's really out there, but it's not really that high. You're just increasing that because you know you're being allocated against. So these sort of things happen throughout the distribution network. Well, what ended up happening with masks, right? Everybody went into this mask mandate. You had to wear a mask indoors, outdoors, wherever you had to go. And so the demand for masks went through the roof and nobody could get them. And you look out there and all of a sudden everybody's making masks and handing them out to people. And there's like neighborhood mask making parties and stuff. I mean, it was just like, it almost got comical. All these people who were wearing these homemade masks and what they were making them out of. Anyhow, the domestic manufacturers had to ramp up production because the Chinese imports weren't really taking place through the supply chain breakdown. So the domestic manufacturers ramp up production by hiring people and equipment and doing what it is to get more masks into the system, only to find themselves by the time they get everything up and functioning and running that the demand for masks has pretty much gone away, fell off a cliff, because the mask mandates are over. Not everybody's buying masks. Nobody needs to wear one every day. And the only people who are really buying them are hospitals, who are going to buy the cheapest masks they can get, which is going to come from China. So now here these masks, domestic manufacturers of these surgical masks are going to go out of business because they have ramped up their production and can no longer function at these higher costs that went into manufacturing more. They have to lay off people, sell their business, whatever it is they got to do in order to, I mean, they're not going to survive, so I guess they just do what they got to do to die. But ultimately, this is where I feel that a lot of things are going to be taking place throughout a lot of the industry. Like, I could almost see something like this taking place in the semiconductors, like with these chip shortage. And I know that's hard to believe, considering that, so many people are in such a demand for these chips. But the ramp up of the, geez, I'm having a hard time talking today. The ramp up of production, right, is going to start putting in more chips into the system than people need. Because once it starts filling the supply, once everybody has their chips, are they going to really need the massive amount of production that's going to be going into what they assume is a huge chip shortage taking place? So basically, is the mask going to move into other things? Now, what I found interesting about the masks now with what the government's going to do, because of the just-in-time delivery system that comes from China and getting it into the United States, having a domestic manufacturer of surgical masks is critical to the safety of the population the next time we have a pandemic, because it's not a matter of if, but when, right? Okay, so now these guys are claiming that the government either needs to subsidize or do something about it, or else they're going to go out of business. And what is it that the government's going to do about it? They can either buy a shitload of masks and do nothing with them, put them in storage, or start subsidizing these companies, saying, okay, well, you can sell them as cheap as the Chinese or whatever, and we'll subsidize and taxpayer you up for the profits that you need or something. I don't know what it is that's supposed to take place at this point. I mean, I guess you could just tariff the hell out of these surgical masks, but then I guess you just want people to have a hard time getting surgeries or something. I mean, there is no way of solving this problem, and I feel that this is probably going to end up taking place in a lot of stuff in manufacturing here in the United States. Okay, I got to go to work. Uneducated economist. You let me know.